I've made a handful of videos about Arsenal on my channel, and some people might call me an obsessed rival fan, and to those people I say shut your mouth. If we're being real, you can't talk about the current state of the Premier League or even world football without discussing Arsenal and the job that Arteta has been doing. In fact, it was halfway during the 23-24 season where I put my bias to the side and acknowledged the insane turnaround that Arteta was able to get done at the club. Through his 1000 IQ tactical insight and ability to shift the culture at the club, he pretty much forced us all to recognize what was going on in North London. I could easily say that I'd kill my best friend to have that amount of progress going on in my football club, but alas, it seems like I'm destined to just never support a winning franchise ever again. But for as much praise as Arsenal and Arteta have deservedly been getting, it's not without its shortcomings. There's always been haters and doubters when it comes to the process that's happening at Arsenal, but in recent times and seasons, the voices have definitely been getting a lot louder. With the large reason being the fact that Arteta is going into his 6th year as a manager at the club, and what he's given back to the club hasn't exactly matched what it should have. I don't think Arteta's in any danger of being sacked halfway through the season or anything like that. It will take a catastrophic fall off for that to happen. Yet the pressure is going to be at the highest that it has ever been for him in the club. In my opinion, Arteta has almost no room for excuses this time around. One big grievance from both Arsenal fans and rivals is the fact that every time there's maybe a shortcoming from Arsenal, Arteta just finds a way to deflect and keep pushing the issue off. There cannot be any of that this season. I'm trying to be as objective as I can here. There's definitely context into why I believe that this is the season with the most amount of pressure for Arteta and Arsenal. Of course, I will get into those reasons, but as always, it's important that we look at the lore as to why Arsenal find themselves in such a pressure situation. But real quick, boys, before we get into that, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you are enjoying the video, enjoying the content on the channel. We drop weekly football videos, so make sure you hit that notification bell as well so you don't miss an upload. And if you're not new to the channel, boys, welcome back. Glad to have you around for another video. Let me know your thoughts on Arteta's time at Arsenal thus far. But with that being said, boys, let's get into how Arsenal find themselves in this pressure cooker of a situation. So of course, Arteta started his tenure with Arsenal as a manager halfway through the 1920 season, where he would come in to replace Unai Emery, who was quickly drowning on the job and essentially inherited a team that was a mess. A lack of vision, inflated egos, a toxic environment. Pretty much just picture the worst things to inherit as a manager, and that's what Arteta was getting a hold of. Arteta was seen as a promising up-and-coming manager from his time as an assistant under Pep at City, so for Arsenal fans, there was definitely hope on the horizon. The rest of the season wouldn't go as planned, as they'd crash out of Europe in an embarrassing fashion, and in the Premier League, lockdown football wouldn't be the best for Arsenal, as the squad would eventually muster up an 8th place finish. Definitely disappointing. However, the club would make a solid run in the FA Cup that would see them get the better of Chelsea in the final to get Arteta his first piece of silverware. The young manager had done enough despite some really poor results to at least steer the ship without sinking it this season. From here, the challenge would not be to see how he would go about actually improving the club. And even though he had shown he was capable of getting some good attacking football out of this team, Arsenal fans still needed to see it on a more consistent basis. So going into his first full season in charge during the 2020-2021 season, he would begin to clear out a lot of deadwood at the club that didn't fit his vision and brought in players who were better suited. Notably in this window, he would bring in Gabriel, who has proven to be a pillar of Arteta's rebuild. But unfortunately for Arteta and the club, this season would be a little bit of a disaster. Very inconsistent results that highlighted how bad a lot of these players were would lead to Arsenal sitting in 15th place from match day 11 to 15. Eventually, things would begin to click a little bit more, thanks in part to the arrival of Odegaard in that winter transfer window, and Arsenal would finish in 8th place for the 2nd time in a row, this time with only the Community Shield to boast. Despite 2 poor seasons in a row, there was still belief internally at the club that Arteta's vision for flowing, attacking football was going to come to fruition as long as he was given time. And time was given to him as he would carry on in the job for the 21-22 season. And he'd continue to be backed as that summer saw the arrivals of Ben White, Tamayasu, and Aaron Ramsdale as key players to fit his vision. And to this day, to be honest, I still don't know how Arteta managed to keep his job for this season specifically. The reason being that they'd lose their first 3 games to Brentford, Man City, and Chelsea with an aggregate score of 9-0. I urge you to find yourself someone that gives you as much patience as the Arsenal board gave to Arteta during this time. How he kept that job after losing those first 3 games, being 20th place, 2 back-to-back 8th place finishes, who knows? But nonetheless, he would not get sacked. And ultimately, things would improve at the club this year as we saw more of Arteta's vision on the pitch finally lead to good results. Additionally, he would exile Aubameyang at the squad to turn a leaf on that toxic environment. They bottled top 4 that year and finished without a trophy, but it was clear now more than ever that by the end of the season, Arteta knew what he was doing. After finally not finishing in 8th place and finishing the 2020-2021 campaign in a pretty good fashion, despite the fact that, they just about missed it on top 4, it was only going to be up from there. And from there, he would literally go on to silence most of his critics over the last 3 seasons. Because for the 22-23, 23-24, and 24-25 campaigns, Arteta and Arsenal have been directly challenging for the Premier League. Over this period, Arteta and Arsenal would make massive acquisitions to aid this process, as the likes of Gabriel Jesus, Saliba, Havertz, Declan Rice, and Julian Timber have arrived to the club and raised the level by so much compared to what it was at before. Pair this with the rise of guys like Saka and Martinelli in the squad, and over these last 3 seasons, Arteta has built himself a machine capable of playing out his vision. But in the same breath, as the success rises, so does the expectation. So as these seasons have progressed and they have challenged for titles, the pressure has only continued to get higher for Arteta. The 22-23 season, which was also the season where Gabriel Jesus came to the club, was the one that did catch everyone by surprise. This team that had just about missed out on top 4, had finished 8th 2 times in a row, was displaying football that was on a different level. It was incredible, and Arsenal would go on to slap up so many teams in the league. There was periods where they deadass just looked untouchable. But this season, they would fall just short and couldn't get over the line. Despite sitting in first place for the majority of the season, their last 8 games would see them pick up just 12 points out of 24, and these included some really embarrassing results. Additionally, they would also get bounced out of the Europa League in the round of 16 thanks to the Kardashian curse, where Sporting under a certain Ruben Amorim managed to get past Arsenal. And once again, there was no FA Cup or EFL Cup for them this season. But some felt that things were finally starting to click for Arsenal and for the club, and that really that bottle job just came down due to a lack of experience at that level. After all, they were going head to head with one of the best Manchester City teams that we have ever seen. So with the team retooling and having a little bit of contention under their belt now, the 23-24 season should have been the one to prove to be more fruitful. The plucky underdog manager and underdog team were no more. It was time to prove that he was a big dog, and it sort of just became a repeat of the year before. Rice, Havertz, Timber, and Raya all came to the club, and Arsenal looked very impressive throughout the season and were even first place again by Christmas Day. This season, however, a few things would happen. Firstly, they would see some injuries in the back line as Tomiyasu and Timber faced some time out. Secondly, Havertz. And thirdly, December would see Arsenal win just 1 game out of 5, which would be crucial come the end of the season. That poor run, paired with an all-time City side being undefeated from December onward, and Arsenal dropping key points near the end, gave Man City the platform they needed to win the league. A hard pill to swallow, but Pep's black magic just did its thing. Additionally, they would get bounced out of the Champions League after failing to get past an okay Bayern side, and they didn't manage to win a domestic cup either. Another poor end to a season that just felt so promising. A season that should have brought more to Arsenal. But alas, with more experience now under their belt and more reinforcements coming in, they hoped that last season, the 24-25 one, would finally be their time. So in this most recent season, we kind of just saw a little bit of what has been dragging Arsenal down over these last couple of years. Over these last couple of years, there was a big hole in this Arsenal team at that striker position. Gabriel Jesus and Havertz were decent, but it was clear that they were not necessarily what Arsenal wanted to be at that striker position. So going into last season, it was clear that additional reinforcements were needed, also to help give Saka and Martinelli some rest. And that did not happen. Instead, Arteta would recruit many defensive signings and only really brought in Sterling on a loan on the last day of the transfer window in a panic. And with that, the 24-25 season saw a huge regression from this Arsenal side. Arsenal were always scoring goals despite the fact that they didn't have a striker, because Saka and Martinelli were able to step up when they needed them. But because that dried up last season, that fluidity in the attack just fell off a cliff. It was very clear that Arteta was setting up to be a much more pragmatic side last year, which maybe you could chalk up to the fact that they had bottled seasons in the last couple of years because they were being maybe too attacking. Arsenal were by far one of the best defensive sides in the league, but they were just not scoring goals. And to at least provide a cold hard statistic, the 22-23 season, where they first challenged and took everyone by surprise, they managed to score 88 goals in the league. The following season, after they had resharpened and again pushed City to the very end, they scored 91. But last season, where there was a clear lack of attacking threat, they only scored 69 goals. And that's a statistic, but even just from watching them, it was clear that they were not the same. They also got unlucky throughout the season with bad injuries to Odegaard and to Saka and to a couple of defenders here and there, so that didn't really help anything. On top of that, they had the chance to get to the Champions League final, but ultimately bottled it as they got a little bit too complacent. They got smacked in the EFL Cup against Newcastle, and then the FA Cup they lost to a historically bad Manchester United side. This is probably the biggest thing on Arteta and Arsenal's time because they missed out on a massive opportunity. City were pretty bad this year, so they didn't have them to go up against, and they let Liverpool and Arne Slot just pretty much snatch their chain. So with that, Arteta, pretty much 5 years into the job, all he really had to show was 3 title charges, but no actual Premier League to boast, an FA Cup, and a Community Shield. Yes, trophies isn't make or break. Arsenal is still challenging for these titles. They're in the conversations. Anyone would want their club to be in that position, but they aren't actually getting over the line. And like I said, Arteta has been full of excuses from the day he started to now. But for this current season that we're going into, all of that is going out the window. I don't want to hear it for Arteta and for Arsenal anymore. It's now or never. Because guess what? They have addressed so many of the issues within the squad. Now it's time for these guys to show up. They've been missing a striker for the last X amount of years. Well, guess what? They addressed that big time. Not only did they go out and sign a striker this year, but they would go and sign one of the best strikers on the market. Victor Gyökeres literally had 97 goals in 102 games for Sporting, and it's clear that he is a threat. Yes, theoretically, there's a chance that he doesn't work, and Arteta is going to have to kind of revision the squad and the tactics a little bit to get him into the team and get him firing, but Gyökeres should work. If he doesn't, then yes, it's 50-50, right? A little bit on him, a little bit on the team, but there's no excuse to say that they don't have a striker anymore. They can't excuse themselves in saying that they don't have any depth anymore. They've gone out and signed Zubimendi, Noni Madueke, and Norgard. So now they even have depth for Saka. They still are missing that star left wing signing, which could be Rodrigo, it could be Eze. I would make this window a 10 out of 10, but still they have gone and signed clear quality and depth, so that is not really an excuse anymore. You can rotate players, Saka can rest, etc. So there's no excuse there anymore either. And when it comes to Arteta, the main man, the visionary, it's year 6, bro. Come on. Arteta is literally the 4th highest paid manager in the world. He needs to hold himself accountable. He needs silverware. How far is really enough with Arteta? If he's not able to take a little bit of accountability, then what's in store for him? Arteta's a great manager, and like I said, I would kill to have this amount of targets at my club, but you have to start asking yourself, if after this season with the striker with huge quality and depth, if he doesn't win anything, not even an EFL Cup, what is even next for this guy?